Today's question's from Andrew Warner, and it starts with Andrew sharing that every time he talks to a founder, he comes away with some interesting insights into workflows that founder has created to make their life measurably better. So he had asked, what workflows have I seen that have had a dramatic impact? And so I put this question out into my CEO group, Hampton. I'm going to go through what they came back with, including a couple that I've developed myself and use routinely. When most people use AI, they often think about using AI to make stuff, whether it's like to summarize a meeting, to generate drafts, to create content artifacts. Most of us who are using ChatGPT, Claude, or any of these AI tools, that's probably most of what you're doing. You're using AI to make things. But there's another category of use for AI, and that's to mirror things back to you. You can use it for scoring, flagging, and that's like a non-obvious use that even Andrew highlighted in his examples that he had sent me around a couple of founders, how they use it. And so I call this the make versus mirror matrix. I'll pull up the visual. And yes, I used AI to generate this. It's when you're thinking about different ways of even coming up with ways to use AI, there's the generation of content and artifacts versus using it actually as a feedback loop, whether that's to give you feedback on your performance in like a meeting or to analyze a conversation, but specifically coming at it from the perspective of applying sports frameworks, or I'd say like performance coach frameworks on how you performed. And so it's very interesting and very sort of discrete uses. Obviously, it's not just limited to these two, but I think when I think about ways of using AI, I probably could put them in one of these two camps, and sometimes in both camps, where I'll have an automation that does a combination of both. And both are valuable, but I would say that the mirror is a category that most people overlook. And that's where I'll spend most of the time today, walking through some of those workflows. I'm going to walk through about 8 workflows from real CEOs who are using these within their businesses and their lives. And everything I show in this episode will include links and prompts in the show notes so you can actually use these yourself. So let's start with the mirror side. The first workflow I'm going to highlight is from Jeff Brewer, and it's the meeting effectiveness score. And Jeff actually uses a tool called Motion, used it myself actually before, that has this prompt out of the box where its AI note taker agent will join your meetings. And one of the recipes that you can apply is the meeting effectiveness score. And I pulled up an example. I'll show you a redacted version of the kind of feedback that it gave Jeff, but also one of the things that Motion does do is it does show you the actual prompt that went into generating the analysis. So first, here is a couple of redacted examples that Jeff had sent me where you can see it breaks down the executive coach analysis by like different categories. There's like an overall score, speaking time interruptions. This will only do so much since I've redacted it, but it gives you an idea around what are the types of areas that it's scoring you. And here's the original prompt that is actually being used by Motion. And it looks based off a screenshot that you can actually go in and modify the instructions. But you can see, and with that too, tweak it if you want to add additional things that you want to look for. But this will automatically run after every single meeting that your Motion note taker takes. One thing I'll say is kind of what's cool about this is you could take this exact same prompt and put it in, you could run it yourself directly in Claude, ChatGPT, your own note taker. And so I'll extract this and I'll put it into the show notes so that if you want to use this yourself without having to use Motion, you can. The next workflow I want to highlight is one that actually Andrew had included in his email, where he was saying it was one that Dan Schipper, who is the founder of Every, which actually is a company I'm a huge fan of that does an enormous amount around AI, and they were pretty early into the Claude space, especially on the writing side. And what he said was that Dan uses Granola, which is another note taker, that specifically flags moments where he's avoiding confrontation in meetings. So he's not using it to summarize the meeting. He is specifically using it to tell me when I chickened out, which I love that. And that's like a perfect example of using AI as an instrument of a mirror, as opposed to using it as an AI assistant. It's a similar idea, different framework, which actually leads into another workflow that Andrew had highlighted, which was he got this from the CEO of Zapier, where Wade actually uses the Five Dysfunctions of a Team. If you're familiar with that book, where he's using his note taker to use that framework to analyze his own meetings. So Wade uses a Zap, which is the vernacular for an automation within Zapier, that runs after every internal meeting, and it analyzes people's participation using the Five Dysfunctions of a Team framework. And each person who's in the meeting gets tailored feedback. So this is team level feedback that would otherwise possibly be awkward for a human to deliver. But what's really cool about this is it's automated, and it's something that's not just for you as an individual, but it's something you can actually share with your team. And so I love these types of tools where it's not just for a one-on-one, but a one-to-many. And I think it's also a really good conversation starter for you as a founder to be able to point to, hey, like, this is what came up in the analysis of our meeting. Let's talk about this. And you certainly could have that conversation, initiate yourself, but I think this is actually just a very easy sort of instrument to be able to transition to that conversation without turning it into a possibly harder conversation. The next one is one that I actually used myself, and it was contributed by a buddy of mine, Pete Sena, who had created this, what I would describe like a God prompt or a mega prompt that I used it for my annual review for 2025, where it's a super meaty prompt. I'll share it in the show notes. But what you can do is you can use it with an Obsidian, or in theory, you could use it with any folder that has a bunch of markdown files of journal entries and notes. What I actually did is I had about 6 months ago migrated about 13 years or more of Evernote documents to markdown format so I could put them into Obsidian, since it became very clear to me that markdown files are like the perfect format for notes, because you can have an AI that is able to analyze files in your local system like Claude Code or Claude Desktop. And so I used Pete's mega prompt to analyze basically like 13 years or more of notes. And it came back to me with a super fascinating analysis, not just over the past year, but it also went into looking at the like trends in all of my notes to myself. So it was like journal entries. It was just random notes I've written about various businesses that I've built. And I found it like super, super insightful. And part of what was neat about Pete's prompt is it also generated a visualization tool. That had Claude generate a visualization tool for you to be able to see how all of these different notes and concepts interconnect over time. And you can also see it had like word clouding, where you could see how many things are related to different concepts of all your notes. And I used Claude Code to run this, but you could use Claude Desktop, or I would probably recommend Claude Desktop or something that specifically has access to all of your files on your computer. Alternatively, what you could do is you could upload all of your notes to like a ChatGPT project, or within Claude Desktop, you could upload all your notes. But you're probably going to deal with a bunch of file size issues ultimately, depending on how many notes you have. But I just found that was like super, super fascinating. Like I've used, and I also did use Claude to interactively interview me for my annual review, where I was just looking over the past year. And I used that specifically to come up with an annual plan for the next 12 months, but also the next 5 to 10 years. And that was a prompt that I got from my buddy Raj, which with his permission, I'll verify that it's cool for me to share within our show notes. But that was also very helpful for me. These are a few really clear examples of how you can use AI to analyze artifacts that you've generated over time and to give you a really fascinating window into patterns and things that might not be super obvious to you. The next one is a workflow that was contributed by Chris Brownage, And what he did is he created a transcript agent to action routing automation where he built a system on top of Granola that after each meeting, a Claude agent will analyze the transcript, determine what actions need to be taken, and it prompts him in Slack for approval. And then it routes that task to Linear, which is an engineering project management tool, or to his calendar, or to email automatically. And there's a GitHub repo that I'll link in the show notes if you want to try this yourself. And it uses a reverse engineered Granola API because Granola, as far as I know, does not have a publicly visible API, but there are several packages out there where people have found ways to basically make API requests or find these undocumented APIs for something like this to work. The next workflow is from Ryan Shell, and he has a Slack button that automatically routes tasks to Asana. So it's a similar idea, but with a one-click delegation where he clicks a button in Slack, the task goes to Asana with an assignee and a description that's already filled in. And that pattern here is to not just surface what needs to happen, but actually route it to where it becomes actionable. The next one is from Matt Leota, who they built an internal tool that is like an AI sales prospect trainer. And this one's really wild. And I love this where it's using voice agents, where Matt built an agent that answers the phone call as a sales prospect and uses it for sales training for salespeople. So a salesperson will call it and they'll speak to this AI agent to practice their pitch. And after the call, they get scored and feedback. And so the interesting piece of this is that the top performers who don't need improving use it as like a daily warm up before they do their sales calls. So it's not just for people who need to improve. It's like a great way to warm up for the day and prepare yourself for real phone calls with real humans. And they have different personas who have different voices. And so he's currently using it within his company, Parsley. I believe it's proprietary and they use it specifically for their clients. So unfortunately, there's nothing I can share, but I thought that was a really cool use case for using not just AI, but voice as, again, a way to level up an area, in this case, which would be sales. And then lastly, one of my flows that I use and have used probably for about a year now, which is a post-meeting automation, where after a meeting is completed in Fireflies, I have a sequence of automations that run that analyze the transcript of the meeting and extract from that content ideas for LinkedIn, X, and blog post. And I have an individual document for each of those channels. And after every single meeting, the AI agent goes through and appends to that document 3 different drafts of concepts that might be interesting based off the conversation. I use this for internal meetings, but it's also like public meetings. And one of the things is it doesn't use anything that's proprietary or sensitive. It's specifically focusing on concepts and things that I can publicly talk about. But the first draft of those things I find it's not something that I would go and publish, but it often will surface ideas and themes that came up in that meeting that I wouldn't have considered to be like really rich content ideas. And that has been super, super useful. And now I have 50 pages of themes and content ideas that I then could even use AI to go analyze and then clean it up, and I'll hand edit it. But again, that's a super easy way that's on the make side, where it's taking these artifacts from these meetings I'm already having to have and surfacing things I might not have already noticed or thought of. And then the last workflow I'm going to highlight is one from Rachel Woolen, or someone actually referenced this YouTube video that she had recorded, which is an AI chief of staff. I've seen a bunch of attempts at this, and I had watched Rachel's video, and it was really neat. I'll include a link to it in the show notes, but she uses this AI chief of staff to manage her calendar and drive internal AI adoption within her company. I believe that one was contributed by David Steinberger. Definitely worth listening. I can't really do it justice through description, but it's pretty wild. She even built like her own visual dashboard to be able to manage what the AI chief of staff is doing for her. But I love this where you're not just building agents that you're using within Claude Code / commands, but you're also creating UIs for it that really make it more accessible and something you could use from your mobile phone or your desktop. And so that's it. Those are the major workflows I'm going to highlight in today's episode. I think the major pattern to take away from all this is this, again, this concept of a make versus mirror, where the mirror workflows are not about asking AI to produce stuff for you, but they're asking, it's about having AI observe, analyze, and surface stuff that comes up in your meetings that you might not ever tell yourself. And it also is a great facilitator for confrontation that maybe you're avoiding, and where actions will often get buried in transcripts, which is, I'd say, a common theme of the last few episodes is how can you use using AI as a tool to identify work product or planning that's actually done in the meeting. And then rather than having to manually take notes or to revisit the meeting itself, you can use AI to automatically extract what planning actually went on in real time in that meeting and turn it into tools that give you a jump start. I think this is a really good example of how AI can be used as a tool to break the initial starting friction of doing any task, where you're coming out of it not with a blank page, but it's doing that initial jump in momentum just to start getting you working and to complete that task. I think so. The traditional method around making is valuable, but the mirror category might be something that you're sleeping on. And so I highly encourage you to take a look at these workflows, think a little bit yourself about what do you do or what do you wish you could do that might be helpful from a feedback loop perspective or to help you level up as a founder or a CEO. All the prompts and templates and links that I can publicly share will be in the show notes. And if you want my take on your AI problem, go to DearBen.ai